Oh, hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. A Tuesday, the 26th of March, 2019. Hope everybody had a nice day. Not just here where we are in the Northeast, but actually through much of the country today. The weather was pretty nice. There is some stuff going on out in the West. We're going to take a look at that. Otherwise, this quiet weather pattern is going to continue for a little while longer, which I think is a good thing. Gives us a chance to regroup. Warm up is coming, albeit slow, in the east. This is a time of year where if you're along the coast, wind direction means absolutely everything. If you have any kind of a wind off the ocean, you're in trouble as far as warming temperatures are concerned, and you can sit in jealousy as areas a handful of miles to your west, to your north and northwest, and to your southwest are running up temperatures in the 60s and 70s, and you're dealing with an ocean wind and temperatures in the 40s. But that's just kind of the way it goes. Mr. Scott Briller, who is almost always the first person on board with these live streams, suggested this morning that with the opening of baseball, we go back to last year's opening day for the Yankees, where the ball game was canceled. It was on April 2nd, and it was canceled because we had some snow, believe it or not. And I pulled up the surface maps from last year, Sunday, April Fool's Day, which had a cold front approaching with a weak low in upstate New York. You had a rather cold air mass back through the Great Lakes and Plains, temperatures down in the single digits that particular morning on April 1st. I'm setting it up from the day before. Temperatures ahead of the front were in the 40s and 50s, and you can see that the front pushes on through slowly but surely, and it does eventually get there. And right before it passed, temperatures were in the 60s. Then the front goes by, and we start to get the cold air in. But one thing that did occur, and you could probably see it toward the bottom of the screen here, I just want to leave the date up, the bottom center, there is a wave of low pressure that develops on that front just as all this cold air started coming in. It was a handful of hours as far as the snow was concerned. It was basically timed just about perfectly, coming in during the hours right before daybreak and then shutting off shortly after that. But if you'll notice here at 5 a.m. with a low centered near Salisbury, you had temperatures that in the day before were up into the upper 50s and 60s are now down into the low and mid 30s, and it might be a little hard to see there, but that's actually a 2-star snow being shown. I'll get as close as I can, but that is snow being indicated on these observations. And then at 7 a.m. you had a 4-star heavy snow being reported at New York City or Newark, or just it could be either one, snowing on Long Island, snowing down in Philadelphia, all of eastern Pennsylvania. You had a moderate snow being reported there up at Scranton. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Sorry. Let's go back. See if I can just go. Nope, I made a boo-boo. All right, so hang on. Let me get this back. April 2018. And this was on the 2nd, and at this point, by the end of the day, it was over with. So I'll just go to, this is at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the snow was gradually coming to an end, and you can see the temperatures through upstate New York in the 20s and low 30s, and the 30s across Pennsylvania, and then of course the cold air just came on in, and I don't even think it just barely made it to 40 by 5 o'clock in the afternoon before temperatures started to drop off for the nighttime hours. So needless to say that the ball game last year was canceled. Now we can go to the latest map, and it's a whole different world. Oftentimes I have found that when you have these unusual events that occur in one year, you suddenly think that it's going to happen again the next year, and oftentimes it's exactly the opposite. It wouldn't have been a shocker if we wound up in a pattern today where you had temperatures close to record highs. Obviously, that didn't happen, but We really had a day today where temperatures were a little cooler than normal, but not overly so. Upper 40s to around 50 on the 5 o'clock surface plot. Yesterday's low is way offshore, and we've got a nice big dome of high pressure that is sitting over Lake Huron, another high centered just west of Chicago, and this high is going to take its sweet time moving out of the way. Meanwhile, out in the west, we've got a storm off the west coast, so we're going to look at the satellite loop of that in a bit, but it is bringing precipitation into California. Some snows in the Sierra Nevadas. There's going to be another surge of precip coming in short order as that low that's out to the west and offshore. You can see it right there. Okay, I pulled the map in a little bit. As that gets a little closer, we're going to see a stream of precip coming eastward. The East Coast satellite is pretty interesting because skies are clear from North Carolina all the way up into Labrador. But what you're seeing in that whitish shading there during daylight, especially in upstate New York, you see where the mountains are, but that's snow cover that's still there and hasn't gone away yet. You can always tell it's snow cover because it looks like they're the clouds that aren't moving, but that is all snow cover up through Maine and New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, down in through the Catskills, and in a small portion there into northeastern Pennsylvania. Otherwise, of course, you're seeing skies beautifully clear where there is no snow cover. Obviously, all the way down to North Carolina, you've got some clouds in parts of South Carolina and Georgia that are dropping southwestward, and that's it. So a nice dry high building in, some high clouds coming into the western lakes there over toward Lake Michigan, and now moving into western Michigan. That is actually at least the signal that things are going to start warming up in short order. The west, these West Coast satellites are always fun to look at, if only because of the fact that you see such really well-developed cyclones out here sometimes, and you have one off the coast of California. The rotation there is pretty impressive, and you can see the feeder band of moisture that is running from in the Pacific to the south of the low center and streaming northeastward toward California. So it's pulling up that moisture, and that's the surge that is coming in for later tonight and for tomorrow. Going to produce snows on the order of feet in that particular part of the country. The the radar tonight is pretty quiet. We have very little happening at the moment. We've got a little bit of shower activity in parts of Georgia. We showed you where those clouds were moving southwestward. You got a couple of showers there on the Outer Banks. You got a couple of showers scattered around in northeast Florida. Out in the west, a little bit of shower activity just to the east of San Diego and east of there into Southern California, and also you're starting to see some showers that are streaming northeastward up into the Sierra Nevadas, where they have winter storm warnings up at the moment. I don't believe we have too much to show you with regards to severe weather risk today. I'll pull up the U.S. loop so you can get the whole satellite shot of what's happening in between. And there it is. Everywhere pretty much east of the Rockies is enjoying some decent weather today, except for that cloud cover that's in the southeast. You can see the old low from yesterday way out in the Atlantic, and the subtropical and tropical moisture that is feeding into the west ahead of that low that is offshore. You can kind of catch it there in the upper left on the angle as it slowly inches its way eastward. All right, let me get rid of this. We'll get rid of that. There's not a whole lot with respect to warnings at the moment that are up. So let me get that map up. So we do have, the round of the spring flooding that's going on up in the northern plains and the northern Rockies. We still have a lot of flood advisories and some flood warnings up. There's a few winter storm watches, winter storm warning, and a couple of winter weather advisories underneath some of those flood advisories in parts of Montana and Idaho. And you can see the winter storm warnings up and down the Sierra Nevadas there in California and right along the Nevada-California state line. I was just looking at the forecast. So this is Reno, for example, is just on the east side of that. So is Carson City in Nevada. So it's really the higher elevations that are going to get absolutely hammered by all of this. So let's take a look at where we're going in the next several days. So our big high in the east moves over to eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey by tomorrow morning. Precip is surging into California. Most everyone else is dry in between. There's a little bit of rain there off the in northeast Florida and just offshore with a little low that develops in near the Bahamas. And of course by Wednesday night you've got snows continuing in the west and northwest. But here in the east, this high goes out tomorrow right off the New Jersey coast, and it really presents a problem for temperatures on Wednesday, in that the winds themselves, when I was looking at the forecast winds for tomorrow, they are primarily going to go northeast to east to southeast. And that is going to pretty much put the ocean chill on many areas. You'll have to go into far western New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania to start seeing temperatures up in the 50s for tomorrow. And many of these areas that today didn't get out of the 40s because of the cold high moving in won't be getting out of the 40s because of the cold air off the ocean playing its part. Such is life here in the Northeast in the springtime. I always try to tell people the Northeast is a horrible place in the springtime. It really is. I don't know where this image of beautiful spring weather came about, because if you live along coastal areas, you really have to wait until mid to late May. At least the water temperatures, once they get up into the 50s, it's a little bit easier to deal with. You still have marine layer problems, but you have to have a slightly better setup for them to happen. They don't happen, on a reflex. Meanwhile, as we move into Thursday, there's a front. It's a weak one that is in the western lakes down into a low that you see there in southern Kansas. Now that front's going to push east. There will be some showers with this. You always have to be careful when you look at the GFS. The green is measurable rainfall. It's not what it thinks the radar presentation is going to look like. The NAM is showing you the radar presentation of those showers, and it's not really all that impressive. There are some heavier showers that the NAM shows through parts of Illinois and in through northwest Indiana, back through northern Missouri. I don't think it's anything severe. There are no severe weather risks over the next couple of days of consequence, really. But this front is going to get hung up just to the north of New York City. Somewhere in the lower Hudson Valley, it'll come to a grinding halt. There'll be some showers along and north of that frontal boundary as we move into Friday. But once that's done, the front will push back northward. A new low forms back in New Mexico here, and you're seeing some snows breaking out across parts of northern Colorado and into Nebraska. Now, this low is going to be the next cold front running up for the weekend. But at least in the northeast, it's going to be a warm front lying just to the north of New York City that will try and push northward up into New England as this next low comes out for Saturday night and for Sunday. And that's one of the forecast issues here. The GFS is racing this as a flattish looking wave that runs towards the Great Lakes and then up through upstate New York on Saturday afternoon. We're in a southwest flow, which means we should warm up nicely. Somebody's going to get into the 70s with this, I believe. But there's an argument over whether this is going to be a flattish wave that comes out and a cold front that moves through here early Sunday morning with a couple of showers and then done, turns chilly behind it, or is it going to be something a bit more developed? If it's a bit more developed, it will produce two things. One is a much better looking Saturday than the GFS would imply. The GFS would argue here that there could be some cloud issues. The European, on the other hand, has a deeper low. Let's bring the European surface up. And this is for Saturday morning. The European's got the low back in central Illinois. It has a much more vigorous looking wave that comes out and goes further west than the GFS does, so that by Sunday morning, the front is still in central Pennsylvania, upstate New York, central PA, into cutting Virginia in half down into North Carolina, and it doesn't move through until later in the afternoon and out, and there'll be some showers with that. Not sure how it's going to play at this point, but one of the things that I think is I'm a bit more sure of. I mean, I've been down this road before. If you wind up with a more vigorous trough here, as the European tends to have, it has a much more vigorous looking upper trough that is deeper and slower. It swings it through. The bottom of that trough breaks off and is left behind in the Gulf states on Monday, but it gets basically suppressed and kicked out to the east. That would actually fall in line with much of the way weather systems have worked lately, with the exception being what happened last Friday. Now, the GFS, on the other hand, wants to lift this up in a bit more of a vigorous fashion off the East Coast. I don't know. I tend to think that that's probably a little bit far-fetched at this stage of the game. I mean, we are looking at a week away, but it would have a bit more of a vigorous coastal low with this. I'm going to kind of go with the Europeans' idea of a bit more of a well-developed low on Saturday, a cold front that comes through, and then it's done after that. And one of the takeaways for me, in terms of how April is going to get underway, if we just run this back, so this is next weekend. This is early next week. So this trough goes by, we get a shot of chilly air for Monday into Tuesday, and then after that, notice the flow. We go to a west-southwest flow here by the middle of next week, and that would suggest to me certainly that the second half of next week could actually turn out to be quite mild if we believe the world of the European. And even the GFS, really, after this is all done, it's perhaps not quite as mild, but it still has the same general idea. It does tend to want to be a bit more vigorous here in the longer haul, but on the whole, this still suggests a warmish look to things for later next week. Perhaps not quite as warm as what the European suggests, but it does suggest a bit more, a bit of a warmer view overall. So let's look at the profile of temperatures with this weekend, and we'll get the thermos up here. You know, it's tough when there's, in the wintertime when there isn't a lot to talk about in the short term. You always have the long range. In the springtime, in this particular instance, you don't have a whole lot. It's one of those periods right now where even severe weather is limited. But looking at these temperatures, let's just run back. And here's Wednesday. So here's tomorrow afternoon. You can see there's still 40s everywhere. A lot of this is leftovers of the chilly air mass, plus the fact that you're going to have a wind off the ocean. And then we'll push the 50s in on Thursday. We'll push them a little bit further on Friday. You start to see 60s and 70s in the Carolinas, 80s in South Texas. And then on Saturday, you've got the push of temperatures upper 60s to near 70. You got 60s all the way up to southwestern Maine. That makes perfect sense. Looks like at least for Saturday, the warm air will make it up into southern and central New England, which will be nice. And then we get our little colder shot for Sunday and Monday of next week, Monday and Tuesday of next week. And there's some, you get this, you're going to start to try to warm things up for the middle and latter part of next week. 70s throughout much of the southeast and into the mid-Atlantic states. But again, the GFS is get the slightly cooler view, quote unquote, than the European. The European, I think, would imply that we could see Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week being pretty decent with temperatures in the 60s and maybe even getting into the 70s on one of those odd days. So we'll have that to look forward to. I'm going to just punch up the climate models tonight. We'll take a look at the CFS weeklies, which are all available, by the way, on Tropical Tidbits. And I'm going to put up the wider view. I don't often bring the climate models into the live streams. We actually have the latest run here from this morning. They run these every day, but I find that they don't really change very much, from run to run. So I'm just wondering whether they just repeat it as they go, basically repeat it as they go by. But I'll go back one run, and there you have the look of the upper air. This is for the period, the mean flow from today right until a week from today. And you'll notice that the jet really kind of comes off the Pacific. Now this is a 7-day average view. Of course, obviously in between you're going to have troughs and ridges running around. So now we'll go to the week of April 2nd through the 9th. Notice the flow, that Pacific flow into the U.S., warmer than average temperatures. The above normal heights at the 18,000 foot level are well above normal in New England and out to the east over the Maritimes. And then as we move into mid-month, that anomaly weakens a bit, but it shifts westward into southeastern Canada and kind of stays there until we get into the beginning of May. But the end of April, beginning of May, is a little bit more troughing in the east, and it's not a straight line flow from the Pacific as we get to the end of the month. I mean, that's in the sort of general who knows category, but I think the idea of the fact that the spring in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, and particularly up in New England this year, New England is going to be different from the springs of past years where we've had these extensions of winters. I think the long-range climate models support it. Everything that you see in the short range, I believe, also supports the notion that spring is going to behave more in line with climatology than being stretched out with late season snowfalls and late season cold stretches that seem to last days and days. So we're really pretty confident of this, and there is a mud season up in upstate New York, and when all this snow, the snow cover, that is the one big downside, Michael Piero, when you have a winter that gives you a ton of snow come the springtime, especially in places upstate, up in New England and in the plains. That stuff's got to melt, and then it goes into the rivers, and you've already seen the river flooding that occurred up in some of the plain states back a week or two ago, and it's still going on to some degree in places. It is. It's a mud. In general, it is a mud season overall. Caribou, as far as snow, Scott Briller, it can always snow up in Maine, it seems. But I mean, even there, if you believe it, the warm-up is going to, if you believe the climate models, the bigger above normal temperatures are going to be up more in northern New England than they will be in southern New England. By the way, collective greetings to everybody on board tonight. Of course, it's always nice to see everyone here. And just trying to see if you guys any questions. Can coastal areas hit the 70s or they can't? Dio Nankumar asks. They can if there's a west wind. But this time of year, it's got to be perfect. And even the west wind sometimes, if there's a strong enough west wind, it would have to be a west wind of about 15 to 20 miles an hour to really keep the sea breeze at bay. But I can tell you that even in those instances, the sea breeze does have some success along the immediate coastal areas. But the inland areas, just inland of the south shore of Long Island, just inland of the ocean shores of Queens and Brooklyn, the west wind will fight the ocean wind off. Oftentimes, it doesn't. The sea breeze will wind sometime at around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So then you'll see your temperatures go from wherever they are, upper 60s and low 70s, and then drop back into the 50s. But a west wind is key. A west-southwest wind can work under certain conditions if you've got enough sun. But if the wind starts to go more southwest, then you're going to run into problems to bring coastal areas above 70. But again, if you got the gradient and it's west or northwest, ideally if it's northwest, that's even better with regards to heating up the coastal areas. That'll be one of those rare instances in the spring where coastal areas would actually be warmer than some of the inland spots. Chuck Cardillo, I see for the first time in a long time the ice has grown further in Greenland. I did see something about a story about the fact that one of the glaciers that they watch up there in Greenland is actually for the first time in years, the ice is growing at a pretty good clip. It may be a temporary reversal. That seems to be what the scientists in the article say. That it's just a temporary reversal. They kind of looked at it as the stock market and being in a long-term uptrend does go down from time to time, and they kind of attributed the change in the melting to a growing ice pack to a little bit of a downward blip in a long-term uptrend. Well, we'll see. We're in the downward blip now, so let's see what it has. 9 inches of snow in March. And in Caribou for the month. Well, after a record February, they really shouldn't complain too much. And yeah, you got the mud season, Chuck Cardillo, up there. This summer is drier than the last two were. Well, we'll have to see. If that, if we get into that warmer pattern that way, you got to wonder whether it might also be a bit drier than usual as we go through April. I'm not sure. I really didn't give the precip idea a good look. But on the other hand, you could certainly have situations with the Pacific jet coming inland that you wind up with some storm systems that develop in the plains and in the middle Mississippi Valley to enhance and make for an active severe weather season. Although after that burst that we had from late February to mid-March, it seems to have shut down. At least for now. Paul Roman, I'm thinking you're going to get into that spring pattern up there in upstate New York. Can't see why you wouldn't. The higher anomalies, the bigger above average temperature numbers are showing up the further north you go up into upstate New York and into New England. So I would say, yeah, I think you're going to participate in that. After we get through this, whatever we get through for Sunday with this weather front going by in the first day or two of next week, that'll be the first instance. And by the way, when we say warmer, bear in mind that it's going to be probably the reverse of last year. We talked about the fact that in these years where we've had this sort of extension of winter through the month of April, you still had days where temperatures warmed up to normal or even a day or two above normal, but overall it would come out to be below average. This will be the reverse. You're going to still get shots of chilly air that will come down, but they'll only last a day or two, and then the pattern will just revert into a warmer than average pattern for much of the time. William Uber, it works good in a way when inland it's in the upper 80s to 90s and we're in the low and mid 70s on the island. Yeah, that window stays open up until about early July, and then it just seems to go away, especially in August when the water temperatures are in the mid to upper 70s and you can't buy a sea breeze unless you're literally sitting right on the shore. That is August and September. August and in September in recent years, even into early October, we've had this sort of extended summer that has carried into the fall. Who knows? Maybe this year it'll just go back. Maybe this year we'll have fall coming on time if spring arrives on time. That would be a novel concept. We'll see. Johnny Quest, you're shooting for 110 inches of rain for you this year. Well, we'll see about that. We're going to go into the season where you maybe can get some weather systems to stall out and produce some heavy rains. But the pattern's going to have to set up first before we can make that judgment. I didn't bring up WPC's 7-day rainfall map, so let's bring that up, and then I'm going to wrap it up tonight. Over the next 7 days, not a whole lot of precipits being indicated here. The green, the last dark green, is half an inch, is showing some 1 to 1.5 inch amounts across upstate New York and northern New England. Then this is going to be with the system from this weekend, clearly, back through northern Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. You have heavy rains and heavy snows. Of course, we've got all this moisture coming in to California and into parts of Oregon between now and the next couple of days. So the reddish areas are all 2, 3, and even some 4-inch amounts. Would not be at all surprising. You have the first dark blue is half an inch of liquid down along the Gulf Coast, South Texas, the immediate Gulf Coast, and central and northern Florida. Some places showing at about 2-inch plus rainfall amounts over the next 7 days. We're not seeing any kind of crazy 5, 6, 7-inch rainfall areas being indicated by the Weather Prediction Center. So that at least is a big plus. All right, folks, going to wrap it up at this point. More weather, as always, is available on my weather platform on Patreon. It's a subscription platform, just $2 a month. We've got 257 folks on the Patreon platform and growing. And it's a lot of fun. You get extra posts. You can message me anytime. Live streams just for Patreon members. So consider it. Great way to support my channel and to support what I'm doing. It's just $2 a month. If you haven't already, you can download my weather app for all mobile devices, Android or iPhone. And here's the link to that. And this is absolutely free. And even if you're not in the areas of northern New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, southern Connecticut, or the lower Hudson Valley, you can pull up your local forecast for any location. Just put your location in. And when I do the app update in a few months, we're gonna set it up hopefully so that you won't even have to put in your location. It'll just give you the current weather conditions and the forecast for wherever you happen to be, so you don't have to manually put it in every single time. And of course, there's the Zoom radar, which you can use, and you can move it around all over the United States. And it comes in handy too, because you can plot temperatures on it, wind. You can see where there's severe weather warnings up, and it'll give you storm reports as well. And that's all free, and that link is up there. And one last thing, folks, if you shop on Amazon, I do have a direct link to Amazon. You don't have to buy what's on the page, but if you use the search bar to get your stuff, it's good enough, and Amazon will throw me back a couple of cigars on them, and it doesn't cost you a dime. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. Not sure tonight if we're going to have a Joe and Joe show. Joe's here. He was here yesterday, but he is not feeling very well. He's got, he's the incubus of viral plague. I don't know if he's got the flu or just a bad cold with a fever. He wasn't up to it last night. He said he felt a little better today, so if I can talk him into it, we'll be doing a Joe and Joe Facebook show at 9:25. But if not, we'll just have to wait until tomorrow. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.